Today, in our fresh fruit unit, we're going to work through an apple crisp. With these Granny Smith apples, it's a nice representation of a fall vegetable. It'll give us an opportunity to work on our paring skills, a knife skill that's very important to have to be able to cut thin layers of skin off of produce like apples or potatoes or anything else you might need to cut a thin layer of outer layer off of. That's what paring does for us. In our recipe, as we read through, we want to prepare all of our mise en place. So we'll check out my table and start working through our mise en place. We know that we are going to need 2.5 cups of apples. It says in our directions that they want them peeled, cored, and sliced. I have washed my apples. I have my chef knife ready and my paring knife ready. You could also use a peeler for this project as well. I have my flour, sugar, salt, cinnamon, and butter out. This has been just brought to room temperature soft. I have bowls ready for sifting and my sifter ready. I have all my measuring utensils ready, as well as even my measuring utensil, my liquid measuring cup. This one happens to go all the way to 2.5 cups. It's kind of a little oddball here. So I'm going to use this so as I cut up my apples, I can just measure as I go. So I have all my ingredients prepared with measuring utensils and the equipment I'm going to need to make things happen. So I'll work through now and I go to my next step. It says to preheat my oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. So all right, I'm going to bop off, go ahead and check and turn on my oven. 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Done. And then my next direction is to lightly grease an 8-inch square baking dish. Team, when we read our recipes and work through things, and it tells us to preheat and to prepare baking dishes in advance, it's really important to do those things so that when it's time, when our apples are cut, when our crisp is prepared, when it's time to go, we aren't messing around with this pan while things are sitting over here getting brown, or if it's a cake mix, chemical reactions are happening and it's not happening in here where it's supposed to. All right, lightly greased. So I'm going to take my clean pastry brush in my shortening here, and I'm just going to go ahead and paint it on. So I go ahead and I pick up a little bit of shortening and I paint my tin. This is going to help keep the apple crisp from sticking really badly to the outside and creating like an undesirable section of your product. The whole point is that we eat all of it, right? So this helps keep things from sticking really badly, along with even just assisting with dishes, right? If you don't have a pastry brush like this, you could just slip a baggie on your hand and scoop up a little bit of shortening and go ahead and do it that way. The main point here is for food safety that you don't put dirty things into your shortening. We only put clean things into our shortening, okay? So now I have my prepped out, my preheated oven and my prepped out baking dish. So I've followed directions and I've gotten that done. Stepping ahead, now it says I will be arranging my apple slices evenly in my prepared baking dish. Then it tells me to sift my flour, sugar, cinnamon, and salt in a bowl and cut in butter using my pastry blender. I've got that equipment ready. And then to bake it. So that means it's time for me to prep out my apples. All right, so we are going to use our paring knife to prepare our apples. Paring is the act of just peeling a thin layer off of something, okay? And you're going to use this, your non-dominant hand, to just gently cradle whatever you're cutting. So there's no death grip needed. There's no reason to add a thumb out into weird places. It's just a gentle cradle, okay? And then your next is your knife. So you're gonna just gently place it in your hand so that you can just close your fingers around it like this. I call it just like a little tiger paw, right? So you're just gonna, want it to be able to hold like this so that you can easily close your hand with it Because this whole time, all we're going to be doing now is drawing towards our thumb. We don't go any further, and that's where our control is. There's no more bicep action. We don't work with our bicep anymore when we pare. We don't draw towards our body in scary, sketchy ways. So we just gently hold. We use our thumb as an anchor because now all we're doing, see that? I want you to practice that if this feels weird before even trying to cut. You're just drawing towards yourself like this. All right? Gentle, gentle cradle in my hand, and then I just gently just put the blade under the skin and draw towards my thumb. Adjust my hand, draw towards my thumb. Adjust my hand, draw towards my thumb. So I'm not drawing towards my body anymore. Okay? Now if you can go ahead and knock that off and start over, but really you could just keep going, right? So we just gently just keep shifting. All we're doing is closing our hand so we're safe. We're not drawing towards our wrist. We're not drawing towards our body because all we're doing is closing our palms and drawing towards our thumb. We're just closing our palm, team. That's it. Okay? Keep your garbage handy, clean as you go so you don't have major messes to clean up later. Now keep practicing getting as thin of a layer as possible, trying not to take off too much fruit. We want that fruit. The landfill doesn't need that. Our dish needs that, right? So notice Miss Peterson, all she does is she draws and adjusts and draws and adjusts. And if your apple has a little bruise on it or something like that, no big deal. This is hidden fruit, all right? Baked dishes for ugly fruit are an awesome application. If something's all bruised up but still perfectly tasty, bake it. It's gonna be hidden under crisp. Perfect, right? Now, when you're working along though and you come across a bruise, if it gives you a little resistance, that's okay. So now this isn't the time when we start pushing towards ourselves, right? We don't start pulling towards our wrist. All you do then is just stop your thumb, your anchor hand stays, and you just give it a little saw, okay? Just a little saw. And you're just slowly closing your palm. There's no reason to draw towards your body or towards your wrist. So if something feels stuck, just give it a little, all right? And then we just work through. So my hand, notice it's just gentle. No death grip here because all I'm doing is small closing of my hand towards my thumb. All right. So my paring knife, I keep it, but I set it aside. And now we are going to slice these. The whole point, team, is to make sure you slice all of this the same size. So we go ahead and we grab our chef knife, and I take my 3 fingers and I wrap it around the handle, my pointer finger up on the bolster here, and my thumb stabilizing on the other end, right? So I have a nice grip. My claw is going to look a little different because this is rolly. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to stabilize this. And I'm going to go ahead and draw my elbow back and drive ahead. And then I just give it a little turn, keeping all my guiding fingers back, but keeping my apple stable. And I draw back and I drive ahead. But if I'm using my blade instead of pushing, shouldn't push things over. You should just be working with your blade and not your string. So now I have it cored, and I can just chuck that. Again, trying to keep it tight to the center so that I'm using as much apple as possible. All right, so I have all these ready. I did a good job of peeling. If you have a whole bunch of skin and stuff like that, you don't even have to stress about that much because it's not a very visual dish. The only thing I really stress about is any of like that hard hull stuff in the center. I happen to get all mine. But if you get any of that hard hull stuff in the center, what you can do is you can just cut up right next to it, like that, right, and say the hard hull is there, then you can go ahead and just shave it off because that would never cook soft. All right. So now it says slice. It doesn't say cube. It doesn't say chop. It says slice. So I'm going to keep all my slices the same size. I'm going to go for like about the width of my pinky. And I'm going to just keep working along. I don't have to putz. I don't have to take my time. I can just cut and add it to my measuring. If we keep them all the same size, team, then they're all going to cook down soft at the same level. You won't have like applesauce in one part of your dish and firm, chunky, crispy apples in another. You want it all to be the same. So I'm up over my apple. I can see exactly where I'm going to cut. I'm not like way back here, so I don't know what's happening on this side of the blade. I know exactly how big my each cut is going to be because I'm up on top of it and I can see. Okay? So if you can't see good, make sure that your cutting board is up by your belt, up against the edge of the counter. You're at the edge of the counter. You're holding your blade correctly and you're moving your product in comfortable directions. You don't have to work in awkward, uncomfortable ways, okay? All right, so we got our apples done. So I got all 2.5 cups. Yay! Got that done. And my directions told me to arrange it. So I'm going to go ahead and follow my rules. I have I'm going to go to the sink. I'm going to wash, rinse, and sanitize my knife right away. And put it away, put it back in the cutting block. Not in the sink, not your paring knife. I want you to wash, rinse, and sanitize your paring knife right away for safety. And then you can arrange your apples. Now it says arrange so that they're even, right? Everybody gets the same fun amount. Uh-oh. I missed a cut. Accidents happen. So yeah, we don't want like that person to only get this much apple and then this person to get piles of apple, right? So the whole point is to just kind of make it even all the way across. There, you did it. All right, so that's prepared. And I go to my next step, where I was told I need a cup of flour, right? And I practice proper measurement. I don't scoop like that. I use a spoon to scoop it into my measuring cup until it's overflowing. Mounding might be another term you've heard. I need a cup of sugar. Notice I haven't had to walk away and get anything because as I read my recipe, I got everything out so I could just work. So nice. All right, so it's overflowing. Wonderful, I got my sugar. I need a half a teaspoon of ground cinnamon. So when we use our teaspoons and tablespoons, we do still want to fill it all the way to the top, okay? I'm going to use cinnamon here, and sometimes on our spice things, they have levels for us. So you can scoop in and then use this to drag it out and make it perfectly level. Nice. Right? Cinnamon measured, 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I already got my measuring scoop out. and it tells me to sift it together. All right, so we could whisk this together really good. We could, or we could just use our sifter, right? So I have my sifter, and what's happening here, you guys, is it's helping mix the ingredients together so they're all fluffed together. So that before we cut in this butter, and our goal here when we cut in butter is not to mix and incorporate the waters from the butter into the flour. It's really just to lay the butter right alongside of it. Okay. So we'll go ahead and sift here. And you can see here the benefits of sifting, because I don't think I would like to take a bite of my apple crisp and have a whole chunk of flour in my bite like that. Gross, right? So let's fluff that back into feathers like it belongs. Anything else that's still fighting me after that, I just throw it away. Okay? So now, just to do an extra good job of mixing, I'm going to do it again. Okay? And you could use wax paper or parchment paper to pass this back and forth too. You could use wax paper or parchment paper to pass it, but I always just consider that a consumable, and I don't need to use up consumables when I could just use a bowl, right? I mean, I got two hands. I can wash the dishes rather than fill up the landfill. So you can see we got nice worked with, everything's worked with. Doing it twice, you can see the benefit even. I caught a little bit more culprit. So that's nicely sifted together, and my next direction tells me to cut in the butter using a pastry blender or 2 forks. All right, so we have our pastry blender. And to use our pastry blender, it doesn't look like this, okay? This is not what it looks like. Okay, nothing's gonna happen. Does this look like anything that's happening? Okay, no. So it's an action of actually pushing all the way to the very bottom of the bowl, forcing things back up through this pastry blender to become a part of the party, okay? And the whole point is, again, to lay this butter next to, in like little, if we were looking at it under a microscope, in little sheets alongside of the flour, not to make it into water, and make the water become part of the flour and start a gluten reaction. So that means if I use something like this, the heat from my hands won't start to melt the butter, and then if the butter melts, then it's not going to lay next to the flour, is it? It's going to absorb into the flour. So this is why we use things like pastry blenders or forks, because they keep the heat from our hands out of this project so that we don't make dough. I'm not trying to make pie dough or anything like that. I'm trying to make crisp crumbles, right? And I'm going to keep doing this. Notice how I'm going all the way to the bottom of the bowl, how I'm wiggling things around. And honestly, let me show you this really cool rhythm that you can go in and really get the job done. All right, watch this. So I'm going to use this edge of the bowl here with this turn, and I'm going to go all the way to the bottom, and I'm going to turn, right? So I'm just going to keep going all the way to the bottom and turning, just like this. So it's going to incorporate everything that we're trying to make happen and get this flour to start laying down next to everything. And we're going to just keep doing this until we get little corn-sized chunks. I don't want a whole bunch of loose flour everywhere. Okay, so I'm just going to keep working on this until I get corn-sized chunks. So notice I rotate the bowl. Get this really good. I rotate the bowl and I push all the way down to the bottom. Okay. Now, I don't see a ton of loose just flour hanging out in here anymore. I'm seeing all sorts of little corn-sized chunks, and I'm starting to get happy with this. Okay, I don't want to mash it until it becomes a dough ball, because then the water will start activating with that flour again. This is the whole point of cutting in. Okay. Notice I did not put my hands in here because I did not want the heat from my hands to start melting any of these butters. Okay. My next direction says to go ahead and lay this topping right on top. Okay, so team, your job is to spread this out so it falls into all these little cracks here, but it is not your job to press down firm. Okay, we're not making, again, we're not making a dough crust. We're making crisp. Okay, so you just real gently with your fingers are going to move this around, but your job is not to smash it down. So you're going to evenly move it around, make that big pile you might have made in the center spread out to the all the way to the edges so everything gets the same priorities. All right. All right, so I'm happy. Notice we got all these little crumbles here. And if things look like they're overpacked down, you can just take like a fork or a knife or something, make sure it's all fluffy. And it is ready to go into the oven. Whenever I make anything like apple crisps or apple pies, I always make sure to put it in on a sheet pan so that if any bubbly, syrupy apple stuff happens, it happens on my sheet pan and not on the bottom of my oven. So we're going to put this in the oven for 30 to 40 minutes, depending on if you're using a glass pan or a disposable thin aluminum pan. That'll make your cooking time different. All right, so we're going to set our timer. I got it set here for 30 minutes because I can't take time away. I don't want to overcook it. We'll get that started. And I'm going to check in on it in 30 minutes. So when I check in on it, hopefully it looks all golden brown and gorgeous. And we pull it out of the oven and we set it on our cooling rack. And we test to see if it's done is you can just take your little paring knife and slip it in on the side here, right? And make sure your apples are soft. You'll let it cool just a little bit to firm up, right? You want it to firm up just a little. This topping is going to like form a little firm topping and it's going to be all crispy, crumbly, and gorgeous. So let's cut it up and let's cut it open and look at it. So you can use any style knife you like, but I do suggest using a knife. And you're just going to make those guiding cuts. And go ahead and just use jumping motions instead of a long draw, because if you do a long draw, it's going to crack all of this. So it's just little vibrating jumpies here instead of a straight across, so that you don't crack it and break it up. If you do crack it and break it up, so what, right? So what? So I'm going for a serves 9 on mine. See how I could do serves 9. I have my Turner spatula. So I'm going to go in real straight. Scoop it in. Oh yeah, got a nice looking slice. You can see the apples down there. Maybe just a little whipped cream right here. Maybe a little. Where's my cinnamon? Beautiful. All right. Enjoy this. Have fun. Take your time learning how to pare. Don't cut too much fruit away. ask questions. I can